Good morning. This is part three of the three-part episode, the three-part show, Hands Off movement that I first uh, made earlier this week. I went on to make a second part, and now this is the third and final part of this saga. Will I have other shows that talk about this subject? Probably, maybe. Um, I don't. I don't know for sure, but I do feel like this is more with what I would like a podcast to be, a show to be, an episode. It's supposed to be a long form, and I've been kind of doing them on my lunch breaks, and they've been 15 or 20 minutes long. And so if you take the three parts and you put them together, you're gonna get a little over an hour, maybe closer to 2 hours is what I'd like to shoot for in one show, one episode. And got a little bit. We're almost there. We're not there yet, but this is the third and final part, and I do want to just say that this one is going to. I did claim on the second part that I was more of a centrist, while I'm more right on the center line. I'm not exactly center. If I was one way or the other, I'd be on the right side, um, but definitely not far right. Way out there or anything like that. But this video right here probably will make it sound, especially to a lot of left leaning um, people, that I am far right. I'm really not far right or even anywhere near close to that. But I am going to just kind of go over some points that Brandy was making. I thought that this was an important issue. She brought up a lot of important topics. I didn't want to just leave them out and leave it like that, so I thought it's appropriate to make a third part. Um, so, to go off of what I was saying earlier about being censored, the other day I was watching some YouTube video and they were saying all lives matter, and all the words all lives, like he could pronounce the ah, but the L and the I, and it's hard to explain, but that very middle part was censored out. It was like a curse word. And that's just how it is on these social media platforms, that you can't even say all lives matter anymore. To say that not just Black lives matter, not just Indian lives matter, or Mexican lives matter, or Pakistani lives, or Irish lives, but all, we as a human being, we as a, a people, a one people on this earth, this one earth, we all matter together. We all work together. We all strive together to live here. Some for the worse, and hopefully most of us for the better. We all matter in this effort. And if you say that all lives matter, instantly censored, instantly deplatformed. You talk about, when Elon Musk bought Twitter, the previous creator of Twitter was Jack Dorsey, and he went on the Joe Rogan program while people were getting um, canceled just instantly, and Joe was kind of questioning him on that, and he was basically saying, "I don't know, um, there's a lot of people in this. It's not just a one person company. There's hundreds or maybe even thousands of employees that go in these fact checking programs, and anytime somebody types something, it gets scrutinized, and if it doesn't meet up to the community standards, then they'll get a strike, and they can get another strike, and on the third strike they will be canceled from Twitter. It may be for 5 days, it may be a lifetime ban." And what was happening is somebody would have post one video, and in that one video they would get all three strikes, lifetime ban, just like that. And Jack was kind of claiming ignorance on that, and it's too big for him to control. It got too big too fast, and he wasn't able to. He was like a shareholder. It was a public company. That's how Elon Musk was able to buy it, because it was a public company. And he was responsible to the shareholders and everybody had an idea. And if he could go back, he would do it entirely different where people could truly speak their mind and be free. Well, Elon Musk bought this company and Jack Dorsey went on and he actually made another social media platform called Blue Sky. And this Blue Sky is so much worse than Twitter. If you say anything remotely critical, you instantly get banned. So it's pretty clear that it was Jack Dorsey who was at the head of all of that, banning people and censoring people, and just not okay with that. Um, there wasn't really much anybody could do about it because it was his company. He was the creator, and it took off like wildfire. It was so, I mean, Twitter when it first took off was just so popular. It's really even hard to describe how important that was for getting information out, that Twitter platform. And now it's kind of spread out a little bit, um, but it's still heavily on Twitter, or now the new named X. But then you have Facebook and YouTube and all these other places. Not too many. I mean, you name two or three. It's not quite that much. So it is very important on how these platforms are regulating their their content. If they're that strict on it, I mean that's millions or hundreds of million people that aren't getting their equal fair share and what they wanted to say, whether it's left wing or right wing. Another point that Brandy made was that Trump's approval ratings are declining. That may be so. I just want to kind of go backwards a little bit and say that the other times I can think of when his approval ratings were declining was right before the elections, and he won. In both elections, when he was facing Hillary, I think he was actually favored. I can't remember when he was going against Joe Biden, and he ended up losing. And then, of course, he was losing against Kamala, and he ended up winning that one. One of the big polls, the big shockwaves around the United States right before the elections was how the Des Moines Register had basically said that Trump was going to lose in a landslide. It was Trump lost Iowa, and this was like a week or less before the elections, maybe like 4 or 5 days before the elections. I think it came out on a Thursday or a Friday, and everybody was just, their jaw drops. Like the Des Moines Register, the foremost power or entity for predicting polls in the state of Iowa, was saying that Trump is going to lose Iowa, and by a large margin. And it was, I couldn't believe it. I didn't see that coming, not at all. And it turns out as the elections went on, he actually won Iowa by quite a bit. So I don't pay a lot of, is he being disapproval ratings, approval ratings? They're so fickle. They're so just slimy and greasy. They don't make any sense. They almost never check out. You can take them if you want them, but I just don't see any value in those things. They're just so off so often. Another point that Mitch was making was that, I'm not sure why he made this point. I'm sure the hands-off movement is like an array of subjects. It's not just one subject, as I'm coming to find out. It's this whole across the board, all types of issues. And one of them, of course, is the transgender issue. And I kind of mentioned that a little bit in the last video. And Mitch was just saying, like, hey, if you're born male, you're a male. And if you're born female, then you're a female. And that's basically it. Even that sentence that I just said, had I said that 3 years ago, I'd be banned from Facebook. I'm pretty sure. I know people that have been banned from Facebook for saying that much, and probably even saying less. And I don't know that statement alone, now it seems like Mark Zuckerberg has taken a little bit more of a centered view, and he had admitted that he was kind of being bullied by the FBI to censor a lot of the media as far as what can be shared on Facebook, and just he just agreed to it, and he said that that was just the FBI kind of hassling him. I don't know what they had on him or what they were trying, but he had made that comment that he was being heavily persuaded to not allow certain content, and at the same time allow the content from the opposing view of that. And he said he's since gone back on that, and he's regretted that he was able to be bullied in that manner. Will Facebook change? I don't know. I'm kind of new on posting. If you go back in my posts, I really have no posts, so I don't know about getting banned or any strikes or anything like that. But we'll see. So this issue of transgender, you know, you can say it however you want to say it. If you're against it or for it, that really isn't my problem. I think that the big problem that most of us are having is the issue with minors. And you can go on to adults if you want to talk about sports and all that stuff, but that is kind of a backseat. It can be a major issue, but with minors, it's not a minor issue. It's a huge issue. If you're talking about kids, you know, these kids, they don't really know. You can persuade them however you want. If you want to grow up Christian, you raise them to be Christian, and they're gonna agree with you as long as you affirm that with, you know, love and support. They may go off, and by the time they turn 18 and have their own point of view and learn something different and decide not to be Christian anymore, and that's their choice. But it's pretty easy to persuade somebody when they're growing up how you want them to be, and that can be with any, if that can be done with Christianity, then that can be done with anything. You can make them goth, you can make them love rock and roll, you can make them hate rock and roll, you can make them love ice skating, you can make them all these sorts of things. You know, if you push them in that direction, there's a very strong chance that they're going to go in that direction, as long as you support them with love and with nourishment and encouragement. They're more likely are going to take on whatever viewpoint that you have set forward. So if you're going to set forward the idea that, hey, maybe you're not a girl, maybe you're a boy, and then they start to think, yeah, maybe I am. Well, do you want to do this, or do you want to, and these effects that have happened, I would consider it as as mutilation, as child mutilation. It's just so unfortunate that, one, if a child makes those decisions, that you affirm it in a young age, and even worse, if you push it on them to make those decisions, and then they want to change when they're an adult and they can't because of the damage has already been done to their bodies. There's no going back. It's the same thing as, you know, when people were going around and creating eunuchs. You can look into what that means if you don't know what it means. I'm not going to explain it here, but when that's basically what's going on. We're just creating a bunch of eunuchs, and I just think that that's the America that we live in, and that's the world that we live in. Then we call it gender affirming. That's really bad. You did leave some published works, Brandy. I'm gonna talk about that a little bit. Here, I thought I had all my notes organized. I'm just gonna quote you for a little bit. Bear with me, and I'll talk about these issues as they go, as I read along here. What I'm saying, this is not me, this is her words, Brandy's words. What I'm saying is that every person, including trans people, has the right to live authentically. Okay, sorry, I shouldn't have read that part. I was meant to read this part. Let's look at the facts. Trans athletes make up less than 0.5% of all athletes. Let's stop right there. 0.5% is one half of 1 out of 100, so it makes it 1 out of 200. 1 out of 200 is pretty high. If you think about 200 people, one of them being a trans athlete. So if you have 200 athletes and one of them is a male, born male, switching to be a woman, and we don't know how far that progression has made, if they just made the decision a month or so ago and now now the new season started, now all of a sudden, I don't know. I don't know those facts. I don't know the statistics, but I do know 1 out of 200. That's pretty high. It's very easy to get 1 out of 200. You can get 200 athletes in a school pretty easily, especially in these larger schools. And then you can get 200 schools that have 200 athletes. So you're talking about one school, and then you have another 200, and all 200 of the schools have one of those athletes, and one of those 200s are going to be a super athlete, and that's what you call a state champion. So in every state, you're saying where transgender is allowed, there's, I wish there was a statistic for this, but you can see that, I would think you'd be able to see that there's a transgender state champion in every state. That's 1 out of a 200. That's what 1 out of 200 says to me. That's knowing what that looks like as a former state champion. You know, when you're up at the podium, you know you're wrestling with these guys. These are the 1 out of 100 athletes. These are the 1 out of 200 athletes. And when you're there, it's you and that guy. It's not a small percent. It's that you and that person across from you. That's as real as it gets, and that's as in your face as it gets. And if you're a woman and you're facing a male who has been a male their whole lives and has just transitioned, is that extremely rare? Well, if it's 0.5%, I would say that that's not extremely rare. 1 out of 200 is not extremely rare. That's actually fairly common. And in when you blow that up, anyways. To give another example, 1 out of 200. Serena Williams was the best female tennis player of all time, and she was saying basically she might not be top 100 men of all time, and might not even be of all time. Might just be current players. She might not be top 100 men, and realistically, according to Roy McIlroy, I can't remember his name from memory, who was a phenomenal tennis player himself, he was saying she's probably closer to the 200 of tennis players, top 200. So that's what 1 and 200 look. If one of those top 200 male tennis players switched and decided to become a trans athlete, as this study is saying, 1 out of 200 athletes, they would dominate. They would just simply dominate. So that's Serena Williams herself saying she can't really compete with men of that same category, not even in the top 100. So here's your stat that you have from a published article. A 2022 review published in the British... No, I went forward too much. I'm sorry. Trans athletes make up less than 0.5% of all athletes, and many states that have passed bans on trans athletes had 0 documented cases of trans kids participating in school sports, probably because they had passed a ban on trans athletes. I don't know, maybe I'm reading that incorrectly, but that's... Anyways, according to a 2021 report by the Williams Institute, only about 6%... No. 0.6% of the US population identifies as transgender. Of those, only a tiny fraction ever compete in sports, and there is no evidence that they are dominating or taking over women's sports in any meaningful scale. It depends on what that interpretation is. Like I said, if you're a tennis player and you fought your whole life to be a champion tennis player, and you're a young girl and that's been your whole dream, and all of a sudden somebody decides to transgender and switch and become female, and now they're the top person when they weren't even in the top 100 before, you can really throw all statistics aside. For that one person, they're being ripped off of their life's work in that sport. And if you know anything about trying to become a state champion or champion of that degree, state, high school state championship or college national champion, that's just gut-wrenching to think that that was taken away from you. All those hours, those hundreds or thousands of hours were taken away from you because a male had decided to switch. So I go back to the 0.5% of all athletes, 1 out of 200. That's a high number. Here's the next stat that she gave. In 2022, a 2022 review published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine found that after a year or more of gender-affirming hormone therapy, trans women had similar or even reduced athletic performance levels compared to cisgender women in many categories. Sports governing bodies like the NCAA and the International Olympic Committee have adopted nuanced science-based policies, not because of wokeness, but because real experts are reviewing real data. Next line. So what's the panic? What's the panic? It's not really a panic. It's just when you say science based, this type of stuff, science changes. Science changes so frequently. And I'm going to demonstrate that here in a little bit. To go off of science it can be appealing, but what is science? What is the process? How did they get that answer? Was it truly double blind? It's so hard. It's so difficult to get a double blind, perfect study that's non-biased. To get a non-biased study is so difficult. We're going to see here in a little bit that review that she gave from the British Journal of Sports Medicine in 2022. This took me about 1 minute of Googling. I just looked up British review and transgender. I think that's all I did is British review transgender, and this was the first thing that popped up. So the one that she gave was 2022. This is an article from 2024, so it's last year's. 2 years, just 2 years after that statement that I just read. And it's going to be a little lengthy, but I think it's very important. The United Kingdom on Wednesday indefinitely banned new prescriptions of puberty blockers to treat minors for gender dysphoria. The announcement comes a week after the U.S. Supreme Court heard oral arguments in a case involving state bans on puberty suppressing medications and other forms of transition-related care for minors. Puberty blockers are commonly prescribed to transgender children in countries throughout the Western world to delay the onset of puberty or pause it as it is transpiring. The medication is prescribed with the goal of giving children who are experiencing gender dysphoria more time to decide if they want to take more permanent steps to transition genders. Puberty resumes when the medication is no longer taken. The indefinite ban on the medication in Britain comes several months after an independent study commissioned by England's National Health Service concluded that the medical evidence around transition-related care for minors is remarkably weak. and that more research is needed. Children's health care must always be evidence led. British Health and Social Care Secretary Wes Streeting said in a press release. The Independent Expert Commission on Human Medicines found that the current prescribing and care pathway for gender dysphoria and incongruence presents an unacceptable safety risk for children and young people. Dr. Hilary Cass, the author of the independent study known as the Cass Report, said she supported the ban according to the same release. Quoting, puberty blockers are powerful drugs with unproven benefits and significant risks, and that is why I recommend that they should only be prescribed following a multidisciplinary assessment and within a research protocol, she said. Transgender activists around the world condemn the ban. That was just last year. The science changes. Science maybe this year there'll be a new science that comes out that supports the transgender movement for minors, and then maybe the next year it'll go back again and it'll keep flipping and keep flopping. So that type of thing, that really that's not where I'm going to. I'm not going to die on that hill, to use Brandy's words. I know that she wasn't talking to me in that situation, but still, science it's good, it's useful. Like I was saying in the previous video, it's good to have wisdom. It's good to search for the truth. But if it keeps flip-flopping, going back and forth on its own statements, how can you stand on that? And that's why we as Christians, we have the gospel. It just doesn't change. That's where we stand. And I know that it comes to interpretations and a lot of scrutiny, but those are the words that are there, and that's what we do our best. We should be trying to do our best. I know that it comes with a lot of historical atrocities, and I wouldn't say that those are from Christian sects, but I would say that those have come from people pretending to be Christians, because at that time it was politically popular to be a Christian. And now may be one of those times where it's politically popular to be a Christian, and I don't want to really be a part of that political aspect. But as far as not even popular, Christ himself said this word of God is not a popular thing. You're going to be hated wherever you go when you speak my word. So if you ever find that that Christianity is becoming a popular thing, it's probably not the real Christianity that Christ was talking about. So that's just going off of the science. The science change all the time. I think that's all that I have here. That's it. The hands-off movement is going to probably keep growing, and I don't know how much more I'll be commenting. There's so many different subjects that I'd like to talk about, ones that I am really interested in. I am interested, like I said, it did interest me. Of course, you just heard me speak for over an hour on the subject without having somebody to talk to, just looking into a camera. I do thank you guys for your conversations. That has allowed me to dig in a little bit deeper, and just keep those comments going, these questions going. If you want to be on the show to talk about any subject, it can be anything. There's so many different things that I like to talk about, and let me know in the messages. And thank you, and talk to you later. Thanks. Bye.